obviously we were very good at basketball, but why were we good at basketball? Because that's all we did in my community. That's all we did all day.
Right.
We played basketball.
Yeah.
I started to meet people at W. Tresper Clark who went skiing, who went boating, who did all of these other recreational things that I had no idea about. And so obviously I'm going to be better than you at basketball because you're skiing and you're boating and you're doing all this other kind of stuff. And all I do is play basketball.
In a corporate world where all employees have great leaders with no egos that create fun cultures where people can do their best work, the employees and companies thrive while doing great things for the customers, themselves, and each other.
Well, we know that rarely happens. I'm Jeff Palacio. I have been a leader for over 40 years for every t-shirt size company, from small 16 employees to extra large over 1 million. Please join me while I interview outstanding leaders that will share stories of great leadership and not so great. It will help you become a better leader while poking fun about all the crazy shit that happens in corporate America.
Hi, I'm Joe Duchan, and welcome to the Corporate Couch with Jeff Palacio. Today's episode is brought to you by Palacio and Partners, providing turnkey podcast creation, hosting, production, promotion, and related creative resources for you and your business. Today, Jeff is interviewing Dr. Russ Barnes. Russ is the CEO and Senior Strategist to entrepreneurs and executives at Systro Solutions, specializing in strategic development and organization design for small business. His 30-plus years of experience in organizational development is drawn from military service, franchise ownership, research, and strategy work with hundreds of small businesses. After retirement from the military, Russ pursued his entrepreneurial objectives full-time. His success was based on a clear vision, building an effective network, consistently delivering a quality product, and maintaining a relentless focus on customer service. Dr. Barnes received his bachelor's degree from Manhattan College, an MBA from Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University, a Master of Science degree in Strategic Studies from Air University, and a PhD in Organizational Development from Benedictine University. Let's listen as Jeff talks to Russ.
Russ, welcome to the podcast today.
Hey, it's my pleasure. Happy to be on here.
Yeah, we haven't seen each other since we graduated from college in May of 1982, believe it or not.
Some decades ago.
Yeah, no, it's fantastic. You're the second Manhattan College, now Manhattan University alum to be on the podcast. Our fellow dorm mate, Eastman Govern, was the first. But so happy to have you here, and just fantastic career, 27 years in the Air Force. You're our first Air Force veteran that's been on the podcast. So there you go. Thank you for your service, of course, to protect our freedom. And I know there's having interviewed a lot of different branches of the service. It's just the leadership skills that come out of being an officer is fantastic, and we'll get into that. And your lifelong learning, you have more degrees than a thermometer, so that's good. So, but let's start with a fun question. I actually have two fun questions because I did some research, and you were still able to dunk a basketball at 47 years old. Can you still dunk a basketball?
No, but I'm working on it.
Are you truly working on it? Seriously?
In a sense, I still run every day. I do pull-ups, push-ups, knee bends. And then the thing the reason I say I'm working on is because I jump rope every day.
Oh, there you go.
And I've gotten up to where I'm doing 300 at a set.
Wow.
And so hey, you never know.
There you go. I'm thinking you might. You need to follow this guy, Ben Patrick. He's called the Knees Over Toes guy.
Okay.
So he has a YouTube channel. He has very interesting. He was just on the Tim Ferriss podcast.
Okay.
And I listened to him, and then him and Tim Ferriss did a video of he has ways to kind of get back your mobility and things like that. So, and he had a 21-inch vertical jump. He had a bunch of knee surgeries in his teenage years, and now he has a 42-inch vertical jump. So,
Oh, that's amazing.
so
Yeah,
there
it
you
is
go.
absolutely amazing.
So
Yeah, and my my weight is in the range for me to be able to do that.
there you go.
So
Yeah, you look in great shape. You look like you can still play for Manhattan College.
yeah.
Yeah. Russ, I know you're active on socials. You got a YouTube channel. You've been on many podcasts. You have your own podcast, Purposely Profitable. But what thing that people even know you fairly well would surprise them about you?
Would surprise them about me? Well, the thing that surprises most people about me is actually my age, because many people, when they see me, they think I'm in my 40s.
Yeah.
And while I am happy to be thought of as in my 40s, sometimes I get tired of being treated like a 40-year-old.
There you go. There you go.
And I just turned 65 in September.
Yeah.
And that's surprising to quite a few people.
Yeah.
And that I meet.
Yeah. Well,
probably the most surprising thing.
Well, you can tell you work at being healthy and fit. So that's kudos to you.
And I'll share this because I think it's important for people to know is that even when my family has longevity, my grandmother lived to 104. My mom right now is 91, and my dad lived to 87. My grandfather was 93.
Wow.
So even when I was young, I saw members of my family living to those ages, and I said, should I be fortunate enough to live to that age, I want to be healthy. I want to be sound of mind and sound of body.
Right.
And so for most of my life, I've been taking care of that with the idea that when I get to be that age, I'll be much like I am now, hopefully.
Yeah. I always ask fit people, not so much their workout routine, which I always like to know because, I believe in, aging in a way where you can have a quality of life like you. Mm-hmm. But, I always ask people about their eating habits, like what's your eating strategy?
You may not want to share this one much, but I don't eat before noon. That's important to me because once I do sort of break my fast, so to speak, then I start snacking throughout the day. And the longer I can push that off, the fewer calories I consume during the day. And the easier it is for me to control my weight. Right. When I do snack, I'll do things like this.
Okay, some protein.
And there's just this is the mega omega, but there are other different types of mixes, trail mixes that I'll snack on.
Yeah.
And then pretty much, whatever my wife makes, for dinner or such like that. So I don't have a strict diet
right
that I follow. I just make sure that I don't overconsume.
Yeah.
And my weight program for years has been, the fit part of my weight program has been, I want to fit my clothes. So when my pants get a little tight, I realize that, hey, maybe I better change something and do something a little different.
Yeah, I'm the same way. I'm not a big, get on a scale person, but if my pants are tight, I know I have to ratchet it down a little bit. So
yeah. But for the most part, diet wise, I don't want to restrict myself. I don't want to, only eat these things and restrict myself from eating those things. So I pretty much eat whatever I feel like eating, but fairly conservative. So I know if I drink too much milk, then I'm going to have, some type of a reaction to that over time. If I eat too much, cheese or dairy or things like that. So for me, my diet is really just moderation. I eat whatever I like. Right. But in moderation.
Yeah. Yeah. That's great. Russ, where did you grow up and what was fun for you growing up? What you love doing?
Oh, I grew up in Roosevelt, Long Island, and just growing up in that town and looking back at what it was when I was there and the type of folks who have come out of that town, what we experienced growing up. It was an idyllic place. A lot of times we look at the people it's a 1 square mile town. It's tiny. It sits in between Hempstead and Freeport and Baldwin. And it's part of the town of Hempstead. But in that little 1 square mile around the corner from me, Dr. J grew up. And obviously a few years older than me. So I didn't know him personally, but he knew my 2 older brothers who are 5 and 6 years older than I am. Chuck D, Carlton Ridenauer, Public Enemy. He and I were classmates growing up. Eddie Murphy was a year behind me coming out of Roosevelt High School. Just a litany of people who came out and did very well in the world on a large scale. The great thing about growing up in Roosevelt, though, is that we played basketball, football, baseball in the street. We had foot races in the street. It was such a community, such a close a community of people. It was just the perfect place for me, basically to grow up.
Yeah.
Because it was in the 70s, basically, 60s going into the 70s, there was still a lot of things going on in terms of segregation, desegregation, integrating schools and different things like that. And in my year group, I got caught up in that. So there were parts of Roosevelt that were not integrated, and they wanted to make that happen. So where my local school was, Theodore Roosevelt, right down the road from me, I could walk to Theodore Roosevelt. I was only there for kindergarten. And then I went to a different school for first grade, Harry D. Daniels. And then I went to Washington Rose for second and third grade. And then I went to Centennial Avenue for fourth and fifth grade. And then I went to back to Theodore Roosevelt for sixth grade. And then I went off to Roosevelt Junior Senior High School for seventh, eighth, and ninth grade. And then I got bused across to W. Tresper Clark for 10th, 11th, and 12th grade. I am the only one in my family. I have 5 brothers and 2 sisters. I am the only one in my family who went through that.
Wow.
Yeah,
that prepared you for your military career, living in different places.
Well, no, I lived in the same house. It was
right,
just,
but I mean, changing, because you had different
exactly.
friends and different, classmates. Yeah.
So everybody who was my age did that. Yeah. You know what I mean?
Wow. Yeah.
So I didn't have to meet new people. We traveled as a class to all of these different schools.
Oh, I see. So everybody went. I see.
Everybody went. Yeah, everybody went.
Yeah.
The new part of it was that now these schools were now integrated. I don't even know what that meant. I just saw the same people year after year.
Right.
And there were, there's always new people in a school. The biggest change was going to Tresper Clark, because they're the only Black people who were in that school when we got there were those of us who were bussed in from Roosevelt.
Oh, wow.
So that was a huge, that I will agree with you. That prepared me, because then when I left and went off to Manhattan College, it wasn't a shock for me to be in a community that wasn't predominantly Black.
Right.
And where everybody in the school wasn't, predominantly Black in the school. So, I had exposure to that change, and I learned a lot. There were just some lessons that I picked up in going through that. Coming in as a 10th grader, I had an attitude. I had a bad attitude. And I wasn't going to put up with any BS walking in the door.
Love that.
And then I just found out that there were curiosities about me and our ethnicity and things like that we just had conversations about. Obviously we were very good at basketball, but why were we good at basketball? Because that's all we did in my community. That's all we did all day.
Right.
We played basketball.
Yeah.
I started to meet people at W. Tresper Clark who went skiing, who went boating, who did all of these other recreational things that I had no idea about. And so obviously I'm going to be better than you at basketball because you're skiing and you're boating and you're doing all this other kind of stuff. And all I do is play basketball.
Right.
So those were just some eye-opening, conversations that went on throughout the 3 years that I was at Tresper Clark, and they learned a lot and we learned a lot. So it was really good.
Yeah. So when you were like 10, 11, 12, do you have aspirations when you were growing up? You were going to be an NBA basketball player or a colonel in the Air Force? Did you have any of that type of dream?
None of that. As a matter of fact, we had talked something about defining experiences that happen in people's lives. And I mentioned that I'm one of 8 kids in my family. I'm the third. My 2 older brothers are 5, 6 years older than me. Then there's me. And then my next brother is 3 years younger. Sister 4 years younger, and on down. So I always felt like I was an only child in the middle of a large family. But my dad was a truck driver. So, he wasn't across the road. He was a local. He drove local routes. So he was home every day. But there wasn't a whole lot of money to go around.
Right.
We basically had everything we needed. But I remember not having sneakers in the 3rd grade and going to school, and the gym teacher telling me that I better not come to school the next day without sneakers. And so I'm like, oh, okay, I need to go ask my dad for sneakers. And I didn't want to do it.
Right.
And so I asked my mom to ask my dad to ask if he would buy me a pair of sneakers. And she said, nope, you're going to ask him.
Oh, wow.
And at that moment in my life, I'm 10 years old or whatever it was. And I said, I don't ever want to have to ask anybody to give me anything ever again.
Right.
And it just became this thing now where I became self-sufficient. I had a mindset to become self-sufficient. Yeah. And when it came to basketball, because Dr. J grew up in the community and I followed, everything he was doing and listened to him, he talked about being a professional basketball player and how some nights you just never know where you are. You're playing in this city and in another city and in another city and another city. And I enjoyed playing basketball, but it was hard on my body. And I thought, man, much as I love the game, I said, I cannot imagine having to play every night. And so I never had aspirations of playing in the NBA, but I still loved the game and had the opportunity, of course, to walk on at Manhattan College. And that was just, sort of a dream come true for me to be able to play at the Division I level and go play against some of the schools that we played against, like Notre Dame and Syracuse and St. John's and those kind of players. But a lot of really good basketball players came out of Roosevelt because of the precedent that Dr. J set. I did not have that aspiration. As I'm growing up, though, and I'm thinking about becoming financially independent, at first I wanted to be rich. But then I started to read about rich people, John Paul Getty and these folks. And I said, man, I don't want to be rich because of the problems that they had. I said, but I do want to be financially independent. So that became my driving factor and my driving force in everything that I did from that point moving forward. And I had an ROTC scholarship. That's what paid for my school. Again, my dad was a truck driver. He emphasized that we should all go to college. He says, you don't want to be my age getting up and down off of a truck every day when you can get a college degree and you can do something that you can do. Again, longevity until you're 80 years old, sitting behind a desk and that sort of mentality.
Right.
And so the ROTC scholarship was my path to my college education. And that's what really moved me into the space of military.
Yeah, interesting. So I remember that we were both in the business school. We both lived in the same dorm. You were on the 5th floor. I was on the 4th floor. Did you always know you were going to get information systems, or when we were there, computer information systems major? Was that your focus from the beginning?
No, I wanted to be an engineer, and I applied for engineering schools at a college and at a high school, and I didn't get accepted to any of them. Now, I already had the scholarship in hand. I'd already won the scholarship. So the recruiter from Manhattan couldn't really figure it out either. He was like, oh, I don't know why you're not being accepted to any of these schools. So he went to the Manhattan admissions office and said, why is this guy not being accepted to these schools? And they looked at my credentials and they said, well, he's applying for engineering, but he hasn't done this and he hasn't done that and he doesn't have this. So no school anywhere is going to accept him into their engineering curriculum.
Right.
So the recruiter asked them, they said, well, would you accept him into any other curriculum? And they said, oh, if you wanted to go into the business school, sure, absolutely. So then we started looking at the business school, and I still wanted to do something in the technical area. So computer information systems was one of the things there. When I was in high school, I took a course in BASIC. And back then we were filling out the programming cards with a pencil. And then you'd fill out the cards and then you'd put the cards into the machine and it would process.
There we go.
and I loved it. I absolutely loved it. Yeah. So going to Manhattan and being able to get into a computer program was definitely something that I was thrilled about.
Yeah. It was definitely early days of having even a program like that. And I remember the reason I picked it was I knew I could get a job. I'm like, oh, this computer thing, this tech thing, you can get jobs. And I didn't know any better. I'm like, in high school, I took a half semester course. We programmed with paper tape, not even cards. So that was even more primitive.
That was something else. Now, I don't know if you remember, but the 5th floor De La Salle Hall was we were the first class to live there.
Yeah.
It opened my freshman year,
Yeah.
and we didn't even have a staircase on one end of the hallway.
Right.
And I mentioned that because being on the 5th floor of De La Salle Hall, the business school class was on the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd floor.
Right.
And if I remember correctly, the computer lab was on the 2nd floor, maybe the 3rd floor, but it was in the building.
Yep.
The computer lab normally closed at 11, and whoever the student was who was monitoring the room would leave at about 11. So what I would do is I'd go down to the computer lab at about 10:30. And then when the student was going to leave, I'd say, don't worry, I'll lock up when I leave. And then I could stay in there until about 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning working on my programs.
Oh, wow.
Because it was fun. And I just, so if there was one little space, how do I program to remove that space? I don't want that space there in my output.
Right.
Just little things like that I was able to do. So it was great.
Yeah. The greatest part is when you had an 8 o'clock in the morning class.
Yes.
When you could wake up at 7:58, throw a baseball cap on and a pair of jeans, and just walk down to your class and be on.
You remember that? Yes, I've done that a number of times. Yeah, that was definitely a benefit of living where we did.
I don't know much about ROTC, so it was a given. After you graduate, you go right to the Air Force. Is that the?
Yes. Yeah. So, you get commissioned.
Yeah.
So not everybody gets a scholarship going in. That's
right.
the first thing. So, and then not everyone gets a 4-year scholarship. So I was very fortunate to be able to do that. I did very well on my SATs, and all of the services contacted me. The Air Force was the one that was most attractive because I didn't want to be walking through the woods with a gun, and I didn't want to be on a ship in the middle of the ocean where I couldn't swim to safety and none of those things. But the Air Force sounded pretty good to me. And so I accepted that scholarship. And so coming in, your first 2 years are what they call general military course. And they're basically teaching you things like how to march and, how to do all the technical things that you need to be able to do as a military person. And then after that, you go into the professional officers course, and that's where you start learning about leadership, and that's your junior and senior year. Those are credit classes that you don't get credit for. So my junior and senior year, I was taking 18 to 21 credits every semester.
Wow.
Yeah, I was a load.
Yeah.
In addition to in my sophomore and junior year, I was also playing basketball.
Right.
For Manhattan. So I had quite the full schedule when I was there, but it was fulfilling and it was fascinating.
Yeah.
I ended up, there's also a military fraternity called Arnold Air Society, and I pledged for the Arnold Air Society when I was a freshman. And then when I was a junior, they selected me to be the commander of the Arnold Air Society, which is sort of a, the Army version is Persian Rifle, so sort of an elite organization within the broader ROTC detachment. And so I was the commander of the ROTC detachment my junior year, and so that was another great thing. So I had a lot on my plate. What
were some of your lessons? I mean, obviously it's an honor and a testament to your work ethic and athletic ability to play for a Division I basketball school, but as you would know better than I do, we had some lean years. We didn't have some of the best basketball teams in the Manhattan College history. But talk about any lessons from playing on a team that had 2, 3, 6 win seasons, and 20 plus losses or give or take. So any lessons there that you took with you over your career?
Oh, yeah. And it's interesting because I made the varsity basketball team as a 10th grader. In that 10th grade year in high school, we only had one win. And it was this attitude, this idea of, you're losing game after game after game after game, but do you quit? Or do you keep trying to win the next one and win the next one? And my attitude was always keep trying to win the next one.
Right.
That's all, Yeah. And so when I got to Manhattan, and it was the same thing, that first year that I played for Manhattan, I think we only won maybe one or two games. And you just have to you go to practice. I went to practice every day saying it's not about whether we're winning the games. It's about how are we preparing to win the games. And unfortunately, during my time there, we had players who were incredibly talented. Sergio Bardaggi, Ducey Hughes, Vinny, these guys Brent Huggins. These guys were players. But the structure and the system that was put in place wasn't conducive to them being able to perform at their highest levels. We were running plays that schools with even more talent were running. So when we played them, we were running sets when we should have just been running, because we had speed. We had guys who could shoot. Sergio could handle the ball like no one I've ever seen. Yeah. And we should have been maximizing those types of things. So it was frustrating. It was really very frustrating to do that. But the guys we just played. Yeah. Because I think what comes in above all is the love of the game. Yeah, well, we're Division I. We're not going to beat Notre Dame. Right. We're not going to beat St. John's. We're not going to beat Syracuse, but we're going to try. Yeah, because you never know what could happen, and so you just go in with that attitude, and it builds a resiliency. It builds a tenacity, determination. Yeah. And it puts you in a mindset where it's not so much the outcome, but it's the preparation to get to that outcome. And I carried that with me my whole life. Yeah. I've carried that with me.
And Notre Dame had was Orlando Woolridge, right? They played during that time period.
Yeah, I hit a shot over.
Was a putback or?
It was a putback. Yeah. So the ball, somebody shot the ball. It came off the rim. And I ran up and I got the rebound. Now, when I got the rebound, my back is to the basket. And as I turn, I see the man mountain coming at me. And he's 7 foot tall. Right. And he looked like he was 40 feet tall when I turned around. And so I just launched the ball as high in the air as I possibly could. And it went way up in the air and it came down through the net. Nice. So it wasn't purposeful and intentional, but it happened.
Yeah. If you didn't make that shot, we would have lost by 46, not 44. Yeah, that's right. So there you go.
That's right. But it was absolutely, and that was in their gymnasium. So it was absolutely, those types of experiences. It's just things you never forget.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
I want to say this too. Kelly Tripucka was on that team.
Oh, right.
And Kelly Tripucka was 6'8", 250 pounds. Yeah. And we were on the free throw line, and I was 6'2", 180 pounds. I'm on the inside, and Kelly Tripucka is standing next to me. And I'm thinking, this is probably one of the most difficult rebounds that I ever get. Right. When the ball came off and a teammate missed, Kelly just jumped for the ball, and I went flying out of bounds.
Right. I bet.
Yeah. It was no contest.
Yeah, he was a legend. He grew up in Jersey too, didn't he?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think he did. Yeah. No, he was good.
Yeah. So talk about your Air Force career. I know it's 27 years, and but just some things that stood out to me. You were Eastern European specialist in the Pentagon, B-52, radar navigator. But talk about your experience there and your learnings.
Coming out of ROTC and then going into active duty, there were a couple of things that happened there too. So I was computer information systems major, and I was slated to go into a computer type job in the military on active duty. Did I say that I was renegade? Yeah, well, I was, and I didn't get along very well with the cadre, which were the active duty officers who were running the ROTC program, and I thought to myself, hey, if I try to go into computers and I'm having to deal with folks who are like this, then they're going to kick me out of the military pretty quickly. I'm not going to survive. So I said, well, let me go operational. And it was very difficult for them to fill navigator slots. Everybody wanted a pilot slot. And so I said, hey, if I decide to go to nav school, they will give me one to punish me. Right. So if I go to nav school, then I can go to nav school. And then when I get on active duty, then I can try to go to pilot training. And that was my philosophy moving in. And so that's what happened. I got in and I started out as a B-52 navigator, became a radar navigator, and I actually did get to go to pilot training. I didn't make it through the pilot training course, but my program worked out as I had strategized it to work out. Just some things happened in there that didn't go my way.
Right.
But I came back to the B-52 and they had a brand new program called Weapons School. There was Strategic Air Command, nuclear. There was Tactical Air Command, fighters. And general officer came in and decided it was time to merge the two, which he did, and we became Air Combat Command. When we became Air Combat Command, they then decided that the bombers had to adopt the programs that the fighters were using, one of which was weapons school, which is the Air Force equivalent of Navy Top Gun. So I ended up being in the third class of weapons school. That was a great experience. There's a long story behind that, but the bottom line is people were saying at the time, if you're a bomber guy and you go to weapons school, your career's dead. That became a theme for me because I said, well, they say if you go to weapons school, you can drop every bomb and launch every weapon in the B-52 inventory. I said, I like that. I want to go do that. I don't care if my career is dead. I'm going to the school if they let me in. And they did. And I went. I had a great time. Very, very tough school. Come out of that and then come back in. Now, I have to tell you that because that led to things that happened after that. So now I come back to the unit. They did put me in training flight instead of putting me in a weapons. The wing commanders from the fighter side got all pissed off and said, we trained these guys. You need to use them for what we trained them to use them for. And so then the wing was forced to put me into the tactical branch of our squadron, of our wing. Now I'm coming up on major. And they're saying, you're not going to go back to another flying unit for your next assignment. You're going to a higher headquarters. So Air Combat Command headquarters now had bomber weapons school graduates who said, we want Russ. And so then I got picked up to go to Air Combat Command headquarters. And that set the path for my follow-on to my flying career. From Air Combat Command headquarters, I went to Strategic Command. From there, I went to the Doctrine Center. From there, I went to the Doctrine Center. From there, I went to Air War College. From there, I went to the Pentagon. And then from the Pentagon, I went to Germany, and then Germany to here in Tampa, where I retired out of Central Command as chief of the policy division down there. So there's a lot of people who are listening to this podcast who that won't mean anything to them. But each one of these moves was a move that put me in more advanced levels of leadership, leading more people in different ways. When I was at the Pentagon, I was the country desk officer for Romania and Bulgaria. So I was responsible for military to military relationships. When we were fighting the Iraq War, we had the coalition, and each member of the coalition was required to contribute something to the war effort. Well, Romania and Bulgaria were my two countries, and I had to travel there and negotiate with their senior leaders to make sure that what they were spending money on and what capabilities they were putting in place were going to be suitable for the coalition, not just for the protection of their country. So these compromises were things that I had the pleasure, I would say the pleasure, because I loved working with the Romanians, loved working with the Bulgarians. The Romanians actually gave me a Romanian name, Russell Barnes and Eskew. And so very fascinating. Yeah, very fascinating time to be part of that and engaged in that. And all of that really stemmed from from having become a weapons school graduate, because that set me up to be a joint staff officer, which then put me in situations where I could go do those types of things.
Are you drowning in boring corporate communications? Palacio and Partners is here to rescue you. We transform internal podcasts from snooze fest to must-listen content that actually connects your team and strengthens your culture. Imagine podcast episodes that make your employees laugh while staying informed. Our founder, Jeff Palacio, doesn't just create podcasts, he creates conversations that break through the noise. Whether you're a growing startup or a massive corporation, we turn your company's story into audio gold. Leadership becomes human. Remote teams feel connected. Your message cuts through the clutter. Palacio and Partners, where corporate communications gets a fun makeover. Let's make your podcast work harder than your email inbox ever could. Jeff is happy to share his insights on podcasting with you. You can contact him via LinkedIn or schedule a Zoom call via the link in the episode description.
I remember you, we spent 4 years together in college, and Manhattan, I think, had a undergraduate student population about 4,500, maybe 5,000, but only about 1,000, 1,200 lived on campus, and we were one of
Right.
those. So I think we kind of bonded with all the people that lived on campus, especially ones that stayed, weekends and things like that. But I always remember you as a very quiet, introverted person. So like, talk about your leadership journey as an introvert. And did you feel like, oh man, I wish I was like that person? Because they're always, they love people, and not that you don't, but extroverts are people that get energy from people, right? And introverts get energy from going inward. So talk about that journey for you.
Well, first of all, I'm happy that you understand that. And because a lot of people don't understand that about introverts, we're sort of characterized as quiet, shy, reserved, antisocial, not willing to come out of our comfort zone and do things that maybe.
Yeah, you never laughed at my jokes in college, so I thought that made you, very shy and introverted. So
yeah, I learned how to laugh at jokes. It took a while, but I developed the skill. And so understanding that introvert, extrovert is really a thing of energy. I get my energy from concepts, and extroverts get their energy from, external and communication and that sort of thing. So yes, every single day, it was one of those things where, man, I wish I was more like that. I wish I could, why these people, they're getting all the, and they're talking and here I am, and I can't even get a word in edgewise. And it always felt like a battle, a battle just to be heard, a battle just to be seen, a battle just to be known. And these other folks were just having a good time. And I'm like, man, that must be nice. But I got promoted ahead of a lot of them. And for a while, I had to start thinking about, well, why? Why am I being promoted? And these folks who are so gregarious and outgoing and fun, and they know, and the bosses all know them, and they hang out and they go play golf. And why? What's the difference? I became fascinated with leadership and what it meant. And I read Warren Bennis and a ton of books about leadership. In hindsight, what I realized was that I was really focused on results. I met a Black lieutenant colonel when I was a captain, and there weren't very many senior Black officers in the military at that time. Still at that time, there were not. And I saw this guy and I thought, wow, he's unique. And I went up, we were at a social event. I went up and I asked him, what did you do? What is kind of the secret of you being able to be promoted like that? And he looked at me and he said, do your homework. And he walked away.
Yeah.
And it took me about 2 years to really get the full magnitude of that. But what he told me made all the difference, which is, for an introvert, the power is in your preparation. An introvert will not speak until all of the issues internally have been resolved. I'm introspective until everything has been resolved. I don't want to say anything wrong. I don't want to say anything inaccurate. I don't want to say anything that I'm going to have to take back later, because introverts, we punish ourselves more than extroverts do. If I say something wrong, I'm going to beat myself up about it for months. There's something that happened in high school that I still beat myself up for. That's the magnitude of it. So until I have that resolution internal, then it's going to be more difficult for me to get it external, to get it out of my mouth. Yeah. However, what I learned along the way was that people placed a higher value when I did speak. So even though I say a lot, they said, but every time you say something, it's impactful. And that's something that I didn't know. Right. As all these years as an introvert, I just didn't know. I thought I wasn't being seen. I thought I wasn't being heard. I thought I wasn't being paid attention to, but I was. So when it became necessary for me to be a more visible leader, because now I'm in front of people who I can't talk to one-on-one and give them the direction. What I did was I said, if I could get everyone to understand where they fit and how they contribute, then they can be themselves and they can be autonomous in their actions, but we're all going towards the same objective. So I also started looking at some of the other leaders who were those extroverted type of personalities. And I didn't like it. There were things that I didn't like about the leadership that was being put upon me in some cases. And I said, there's got to be a different way. And my different way became more of a strategic leader. And that worked exceptionally well for me. Yeah. So I would say, so when I took over as chief of the policy division, as an example, I walk in, the place is in a shambles. There were a lot of reasons for that. And I started asking people in the division, what do you do? And how do you do that? And why do you do that? And I was getting answers like, oh, we polish shiny objects. We do whatever they tell us to do. And I'm thinking, these are not real substantive answers here that I'm getting. So I'm in 06. I went to the other 06 who were division chiefs. And I said, what does the policy division do? How does that help you do what you do? And nobody had a clue. So I said, okay, policy exists for a reason. And then I started breaking it down. I said, okay, what should policy do? What should it contribute? Why is it even a division? And I came up with a definition for policy that I call the operationalized definition of policy. And I started to share that with my team. And then I reorganized my team. So there was regional policy, there was national policy, there was strategic policy, and I organized them in the office spaces so that they were together with each other. And then when I started hiring people into the division, I wanted to know, what is your interest in policy? And if they weren't enthusiastic and motivated about them, then they weren't going to be hired in my division. So now I'm really setting myself up as an introverted leader because I have an objective. I have a purpose and intent for why we exist. I'm now bringing in people who understand what they do, what their skills are, how they can contribute. And then I set them free. And I said, okay, your job is to know everything there is to know about your area. And if there's an issue or problem, your job is to come and tell me about it. And when you come and tell me about it, you need to have some potential solutions. And I also set him free by saying, I want you to go around and talk to the other directorates. So we work plans and policy, but you have operations, you have logistics, you have, you have all the other divisions where we're basically J5, and you have the J1 personnel, J2 intel, and so forth. So I set him free to go out beyond the J5 and coordinate and collaborate with people. So all of these things are now things that I'm learning and I'm implementing as an introverted leader. And there came a point in time where I was sitting at my desk one day with basically nothing to do.
Right.
Because everyone was deployed and everyone was motivated and enthusiastic. And one interesting thing is that I used to tell them, you need to leave the office. You need to go home and be with your families and spend time. And my 2-star hated that I would do that. But I said, you need to get out of here. And then one day, a couple of the folks came into my office and they said, but boss, you're still here.
Right. There you go.
So on a couple of occasions, I left the office. I went to the base exchange. I hung out for about 40 minutes and then I came back. There you go. Once they were gone. So being an introverted leader it's all about the preparation. And I just tried to give an example of how I functioned as an introverted leader. I still had the same problems within the meetings where other people were more vocal. They were more visible and those types of things. But then I became comfortable with it. I said, the way I lead is the way I need to lead. And I'm getting results. And that's being recognized by virtue of I'm being promoted. I was never one who wanted to be promoted. I didn't strive to get to the next rank or strive. I just wanted to do interesting things, fascinating things, things that had significance. And I was very fortunate throughout my entire military career to be able to do some of those things. So anyone who does know the military, does know the joint community. I was a member. I was pretty much Air Force specific I was 11 years flying, and then I was 16 years higher headquarters. 9 of those years I was joint. Anybody who does know the military and understands joint recognizes that I was functioning in a different sphere as a joint staff officer.
Russ, I know for a lot of people that leave the military and then get into kind of the corporate, professional, starting their own business life, it's sometimes a challenge. You left, retired or decommissioned in 2009, and I think 2015 you started your business. So what was that 5-6 year journey like for you?
It's challenging for many of the military service members who are transitioning to a post-military career. And something that I learned, fairly early on is that there's sometimes we call it transition. we use the word transition. You're transitioning out of the military into the civilian community. But what I recognize is that there's transformation that occurs in some instances. So if you're a military police and you decide to leave the military and become a civilian police officer, that's a transition. You're taking the skill set and experience that you've already acquired and you're just moving it into a different community. That's a transition. But if you're a military police officer, a military police, and you decide you want to go into information technology, that's a transformation, because now all the things that you've been doing don't apply. And you have to get education, you have to get training, you have to get experience and all those types of things. So that's a transformation. And when someone thinks that they're in a transition, when they're actually in a transformation, it can be incredibly frustrating. And I knew I was going to be in a transformation because I knew that I didn't want to work for anybody when I retired from the military. Growing up, I mentioned that financial independence was the most important thing for me. So this 27-year detour took me away from pursuing financial independence. But now I had the opportunity to get back on that life objective, that life goal. And so I was determined to do it. There was nothing that was going to prohibit me from being able to go down that path. But again, as an introvert, now I'm thinking, I'm not the outgoing kind of guy. I'm not the social kind of person who's going to go out there and wow people with my charm and my personality. So how am I even going to make this work? And that was a fear, and that was a concern that I had going into the thing. But if that was what was stood between me and having the financial independence that I wanted, then hey, let's go.
Right.
It wasn't a question. Let's go. And so making that decision, I tried some other things. I tried options trading. I said, hey, if I could do options trading and I could make some money just sitting at my computer, that would be wonderful. But of course, it didn't work.
Yeah, sounds good in theory.
In theory, exactly. So going into business was a controllable thing that I could do, and I could learn that, and I could figure out how to do that. And so that's what set me on the path to becoming an entrepreneur. And because I didn't really know what my marketable skill was, I actually went into a franchise. I did a leather restoration and vinyl repair franchise. Imagine that.
Yeah.
A full colonel, retired, fixing people's stuff.
Yeah. What was the name of the franchise?
The name of the franchise was Profitabl. Okay. It was a company out of Canada.
Yeah.
And they had been doing, the CEO had 200 franchisees in Canada and wanted to expand into the United States. Some of the things about the franchise that I liked was that he didn't require royalties. So the more money I made, the more I could keep, because once I paid my fee, the rest of it was mine. And I really liked that. He also, by virtue of wanting to expand into the United States and go from 200 to 800 franchisees, that told me that he's going to do whatever he can to support me, because my success contributes to his success. So it turned out to be a good deal. And that gave me a real feeling of confidence that this was going to be a good situation. Other franchises were looking for royalties. They had 10-year contracts. This one only had 5 years, but Fibernew was the name of the company. And I actually only stayed for 2.5 years because I'm a retired colonel. I was used to sitting behind a desk. Fixing people's stuff wasn't in my wheelhouse.
Right.
I tried to hire people. It was a very difficult, very artistic skill. And it was very difficult to hire people, get them to the level where they could develop the skill they needed to perform so that I could go off and do my CEO stuff. I called the company and I said, this isn't really working out. We talked about the challenges, and they actually helped me sell my franchise, my territory, after 3 years. So 3 years I was out. It was a really huge disconnect for people because they did know me as a colonel, and they couldn't figure out why I was doing this particular business. What they missed is that I was in it to become a CEO, to learn how to become a CEO. And some of the grassroots things that I did during that period of time enabled me to, number one, figure out what my marketable skill was, what my passion and drive was, and to get the experience to be able to do that.
So when did you get the idea for starting Systro Systems and defining your goal of helping 600,000 business owners become profitable?
As a part of that entire journey. So while I was a franchisee, I joined a networking organization called BNI, Business Networking International. I joined it to learn. It's a referral marketing organization, but I joined it because I knew I needed to learn. I was about 7 months in business when I joined BNI. and they had these training programs, and I took every single one of them twice. Preparation is the power of an introvert. Along the way, I noticed that there were some small business owners who were doing what they'd been taught and told to do, and they weren't making money. I wasn't making as much money as I thought I could and should have been making at that point in time. So it was personal to me too. And I started to ask myself, why? Why not? Why aren't they? They're doing what they were taught and told. Why aren't they being able to make money? And it became an obsession for me. And I started working with some of the business owners in the chapter to try to see if I could help them. Going back and forth about what was missing. Yeah, it became an obsession for me. Eventually, I came up on the idea that organization development was missing. Strategy was missing. And I believed in my heart that this was a gap that I could fill. And if you've read Good to Great, then, they talk about what do you believe you can be the best in the world at? And I believed I could be the best in the world at strategy and strategy development. So I wanted to bring strategy development to the small business community. And remember, this is back now, we're talking back in 2012. People didn't even care about customers back in 2012. So this was sort of a leading edge thing. And I said, and I wanted to figure this out. So I came across a guy named Jay Galbraith, and he had created a model called the STAR model, organization design model called the STAR model. And I said, well, maybe I can apply this to small business. And I attempted to do that. It didn't work because Jay Galbraith's model was built for corporate. There are many organization design models built for corporate. How many organization design models are built for small business?
Zero.
Zero.
Yeah.
The reason is because corporate pays a ton of money for these models. And you've probably heard the 7S model. There's tons of them out there. Mm-hmm. But for a small business owner can't pay a consultant to build a organization design model. And even if the consultant did it, you'd have to build a different one for every business. And it's just not cost effective to do that. So that's what I decided to do, is to build organization design models for small business. And that's what got me into Systro. Initially, I was Systro consulting. But when I realized that I didn't know enough about organization development to actually build these models, that's what drove me into the PhD program. I already had 2 masters. So I decided to build organization design models for small business owners. And at that point, I realized that I didn't know enough about organization development to be able to build those models. So that's what put me into the PhD program. I already had 2 master's degrees, and I had the GI Bill, which would pay for the PhD. So I'm in Florida. I searched the country for PhD programs in organization development that had some type of a focus on organization design. And the only one was Benedictine University in Illinois. So I traveled from Florida for 2 years to go to Benedictine to take their PhD program because they had a specialty in organization design. And that's where I developed and created the models that I use now for Systro Solutions. Once I graduated from the PhD program, then I rebranded everything that I was doing and renamed the company Systro Solutions. And that was the foundation of what it is today.
Couple of questions there. So I think this is the second time I've seen somebody get a PhD in organizational development design, but it's in the philosophy curriculum, or the vertical. Is so interesting to me. Like, do you have any insight on that?
That is interesting. If it's in the philosophy, we did do a lot of sort of the philosophy.
Yeah. Yeah, that's why I just thought it was interesting. The other question I have, I always like why people name companies what they name them. So Systro Solutions, what was the kind of basis for the name?
Systro is a combination word. It's systems, strategies, and organization just melded into the one word Systro.
So I always ask people that start their own business. I think, you have the idea, and obviously you do, once you got your doctorate, you're well versed in it. But I always think it's one of the hardest things for a business owner that starts their own company or organization is getting the clients. So what was that process like for you?
Yeah, that is the hard. I wanted to start a website called firstcustomer.com and focus on getting that first client, because that's a challenge. And it was daunting for me because I went through a tremendous evolution. When I left the military, I needed to replace a certain amount of money so that I could sustain the lifestyle that my wife had grown accustomed to, if you know what I mean. And and so that was my objective. And I was looking for ways to do that. And this business thing, this could be a way for me to do that. But nobody's going to pay me because I need to make more money. And then it became a matter of, okay, well, then what am I going to do? So the franchise helped me to learn the mechanics and everything that has to do with being in business. But then when I stepped out on my own, now it's completely different. And if something was interesting in there where I had my MBA and I'm thinking to myself, I have an MBA. Why don't I understand how to build this business? And so I still had my textbooks. I went and took a look at them and realized that they were teaching me to be a corporate employee. They weren't teaching me to be an entrepreneur or business owner. So I had to, again, blaze this trail of trying to figure out how does all this stuff come together. Having had the experience of being in the franchise helped me, because when I went to my first client, when I had my first conversations with prospects to become my clients, I remember sitting across from a lady, and she looked at me and she says, well, you've been in the military. What makes you think you can help me? And I recounted some of the experiences that I'd had as a franchisee. And after she heard me, she said, oh, yeah, you know what you're talking about. Right. And she became one of my early clients. I tried not to do a lot of free, because if you do free, then people don't really buy into it. Okay, yeah. It didn't really help me, but I'm just, he's a nice guy, so I'm saying anything. So that was another really challenging thing, is how do I set my prices and how do I determine how much to charge? I started out with hourly rates, and I remember sitting there across from a client, and I could see like the time ticking. And every moment that's ticking, they're ticking off more money, right. How much is it? And I said, I don't need you ticking off money. I need you to concentrate on what we're working on so we can get to where you're making more money. But it was a real challenge. It was a real challenge in that. And I came up with a balance in the beginning. I said, personal injury attorneys get paid when they win your case. And I said, I'm going to set this up where I'm going to get paid when I help you make money. And that reduced the risk for some people. This is one of the things we were talking about earlier, where I did something different than what was traditionally done. I said, we're going to work together, and I'm going to help you generate $6,000 in new revenue. And when you generate $6,000 in new revenue, you're going to pay me $600. Right. So it wasn't free, but it was contingent upon me being able to deliver results. And that actually established a reputation for me in terms of that part of my business. The other thing I did was I said, I created a workshop, and I said, I'm going to work with entrepreneurial support organizations who are grant funded. And then they'll write me into the grant. And once the grant is approved, then I get paid. So now I had a more stable revenue stream, and I could actually get paid more because it was within the framework of a larger program that was supported by a corporate organization. And so those two things kept me sustainable for a long time. And because I had virtually no overhead, very little overhead, that money coming in allowed me to create the space to grow.
Yeah.
To help 600,000 micro business owners as my going in objective, I knew I could not do coaching and consulting and webinars and seminars and be able to help that amount of people. I chose that amount of people because I wanted to have a positive impact on the economic development of communities. I wanted to help people understand generational wealth, but more generational business. How do you do these things? And so with that in mind, I knew I was going to have to be automated. Remember, again, we're talking back in 2012, by then I was talking between 2015 and 2019 when I'm having those thoughts. And so I knew I was going to have to do something that was going to be automated. So that's where the business has evolved to right now. I have a business readiness assessment that's automated. I have a revenue strategy development app that's automated, and people can access those and get the strategy development that they need without me having to be part of that process.
And what does that ideal customer profile look like for you in terms of what type of company, business owner that you can help the most?
So I term it they're in the pre-profitability stage. It doesn't mean they're not making any money. They just don't know where their money is coming from. And if anything changes in the environment, they could lose their business overnight. Pre-profitable, I've had customers who were doing $250,000 in annual revenue, but they weren't profitable. You take a look at a general contractor doing that type of business. They're a small business, but they're very precarious in their position, depending on how much money they have to lay out in order to get a job, and then they have to purchase the materials and everything to perform the job. They could actually lose money. So anyone who is in the pre-profitability stage and they just don't know what to do next. I know my business. I know how to serve customers and clients. I know how to fix their problems. But this business side, I'm confused. And what they get a lot of times is on the business side, the training that is available is how to set up an LLC, how to do a marketing campaign, how to do sales. All of these things are very critical components of it. But if you don't have the business model, how are you actually making money? Whose problem are you solving that's urgent and painful and it has consequences? And is your solution an actual remedy to that problem that gets results? And have you, formed it in the form of a product? I call a product a solution package with a price. Have you done those things? If you're not working on those things, then say whether your business is an LLC or an S corporation or a C corporation, doesn't matter.
Right.
And I talk about people who are doing those sorts of things. They're in the business of being in business.
Right.
I want people to be in the business of making money while making a difference.
Yeah.
And so if you know anybody who is just struggling to make money in their business and they just don't know where to go and everything they're reading and studying and learning isn't helping, that's the person I want to work with.
Okay. Yeah,
and they're
right.
difficult to work with because people in the pre-profitability stage, by definition, have no money. So hiring a coach who's going to charge you $10,000, hiring a consultant who may not know your actual skill set is difficult. I want to throw this one other thing in there, and that is that when we talk about go into business, there's a couple of ways you can do that. You can have an idea and go into business. You can look at businesses that exist, like a landscaper, for example, and you can say, I'm going into the landscaping business. It's much less challenging than if you just have an idea because the road has already been paved. Customer resource management tools have already been created for a landscaping business or an IT business, or you can buy a business where the systems have already been built. There's a customer base and all these other kind of things. So when someone thinks about going into business, there's different ways you can do that. The people who have the least difficulty are those who have the resources and the capital to actually buy a business and then improve upon that business. And now it's just a matter of selecting the one that, you think you can best suit it to make that happen.
Russ, I know when you were doing your podcast, every Thursday episode was book recommendations, and you and I have chatted. We're, lifelong learners. We love, learning, and books are a great way to do that. You've mentioned some throughout our conversation today, but any others that come besides your own small business for service members? What other books do you usually recommend to people in the business owner space?
The first book I always recommend is The E-Myth Revisited by Michael Gerber. I was fortunate that when I was getting ready to go down this path, I was still in active duty and I was taking classes with the Small Business Administration. And there was a gentleman in there who said, if you haven't read The E-Myth Revisited, you need to read that. And so that was very foundational for me because it does talk about the structural framework of building a company, and just everybody should read that if you're going into business. The second one I recommend is called Profit First by Michael Michalowicz. And then that one really gives you a mental framework for managing the money that you're making and how to put it into various categories so that you never overstep your financial boundaries and find yourself in financial trouble, whether it's for your taxes or various other things that could impact you, such as if you're spending money out of your business account, that's a problem. For personal stuff out of your business account, that's a problem. Profit First helps you to work through all those things. And a book that we've talked about, The Go-Giver, that is high on my list. And out of The Go-Giver, I focus on one particular one, which is the law of compensation, because it applies to small business owners, which is your income is determined by how many people you serve and how well you serve them. That plays in my mind every single day. So I have a ton of books and I could recommend, but those three are key, and I always recommend those three.
Yeah. Yeah, Russ's background is filled with hundreds of books. So there you go.
Yes.
Russ, I love helping two groups of people. One's that recent college graduate or now even high school graduate that chooses to move on to a professional career. What advice do you have for them as they get that first professional job as well as start their career?
The biggest piece of advice is know who you are. If you don't know what your God-given gifts are yet, spend the time to figure out what they are. There's a few ways you can do that. You can ask other people, what am I good at? What do you think I'm the best at? You can look at what people always ask you to do, and that will give you a sense of what they think you're good at. Think about the things that come so easily to you that you don't think they have any worth or value at all, because what comes easily to you doesn't come easily to others. When you figure out what your gift is and what your talent is, then everything you do from that point on should be shaped and framed around how you can best deliver that talent to help other people's lives be better. So if you decide to go into business, if you decide to go get a job, if you decide to teach, whatever it is, teach from your strength. That may be coming from an introverted perspective, but it applies to extroverts just as well as it applies to introverts. That would be my biggest piece of advice. And my wife and I have 4 sons. And in raising our boys, what was in the back of my head every single day is, what is this particular son good at? Where is his gift? Where is his talent? And how do I help put him into environments where he can thrive based on who he is? So that would be my most significant piece of advice.
I love that advice. I love that. The second group is, well, everyone can be a leader in an organization. Once the people that want to have responsibility for a team of people become that first-time manager, what advice do you have for them as they begin that leadership journey?
Study other leaders. Study a wide variety of leaders. And you can't see the top level of this bookshelf that's behind me, but on that top level, probably half the books are about military leaders. When I was on active duty, I was reading constantly about military leaders because I was one. And I wanted to see what the differences were between how this officer became successful as opposed to that officer. You had Eisenhower and Marshall during World War II. Why was Marshall not a field officer, which is what he most wanted to be? Why was Eisenhower? So Patton, his philosophies, his way of communicating. So study other leaders. And then once you have a broad perspective on how leaders lead, then you have to find out what is your own authentic style of leadership. And you have to be true to yourself as a leader. I'm an introverted leader. I lead like an introvert. I don't apologize to anyone for the way I lead. And the people who are best suited to follow my leadership are attracted. And those who are not attracted, which is great because I don't want to work with you anyway.
Exactly.
Go away.
Yeah.
I did want to say something very quickly, and that is I also recognize that as a leader, we sometimes, there's leaders leading leaders and leaders leading followers. My entire military career, I was a leader leading leaders because I was in aviation. Everybody who flew on the airplane, well, we did have gunners who were enlisted, but the majority were officers. So I was writing performance reports on officers. I don't think in my entire 27-year career that I ever wrote a performance report on an enlisted person because I was always in higher headquarters staff. I was always leader leading leaders. And when you're leader leading leaders, you have to give them rope. The people who complain about micromanaging leaders, they are leaders because they just, hey, tell me what I need to do and let me go do it. I'll come back. I'll make you look good.
Right.
Followers, which is not a bad thing. Followers are more task focused and they want the leader to tell them what to do. This is what we need to do. This is what we need to get accomplished. Clear guidance, clear direction. Nothing wrong with that because once they have clear guidance and clear direction, they're going to get the job done.
Yeah.
But what typically happens is a leader will look at the followers and say, you need to take more initiative. And they'll look at their leaders and they'll say, you guys need to get with the program. Stop all this out of the box stuff and get with the program, which is the opposite, which is the wrong thing. You should be letting your leaders take initiative and you should be telling your followers, hey, this is the program. Right. So I just tried to cut it a little bit short, but there's a very big difference. And I think most people who are leaders are leading their leaders and leading their followers in the opposite way of what they should be doing.
Right. Russ, it's great to reconnect with you. Thanks so much for being on the Corporate Couch today. And we're recording here the day before Thanksgiving 2025. So I hope you and your family have a lovely and a terrific Thanksgiving.
Yeah, likewise, Jeff. I really appreciate you having me on the show. We went through and covered a lot of different things. I could talk about this stuff all day long. We got a lot of stories, right?
Exactly.
But I really appreciate catching up with you again after our long history. It started so far back. I wish you and your family a very happy day as well.
Yeah. Thank you. Oh, I loved reconnecting with Russ. I mean, he's the second Manhattan College, now Manhattan University, guest on the podcast. The first one was Eastman McGovern, who I met on day one of college and became one of my best friends to this day. I do have to clarify. So the first 3 years, Russ and I lived in the same dorm, and it's not like an 8-floor, 10-floor dorm where there's hundreds of people. I'm talking about a dorm that 2 floors had maybe 50 people. So we all knew each other. So it wasn't like, you pass somebody, every other week or something in the elevator.
Because very few people lived on campus. Did you say that?
Yes, that, and we were in the smallest dorm because, as we talked about, we were in the De La Salle. Our dorm was on the 4th and 5th floor, and the first 3 floors were classrooms. And there was the business school. So we would get up at 7:58 for an 8 a.m. class and just walk, down
downstairs
floor,
in class,
or first floor. I mean, I guess if it was on the first floor, we get up at 7:57 to make sure we got there on time. So we saw each other all the time. It was funny. In my research, I saw he was still dunking at 47 years old. And it was kind of a joke. I led off, I think, the episode with that. I go, "Hey, Russ, can you still dunk?" He didn't even laugh it off. He was very serious. He goes, "Yeah, I run every day. I do pull-ups. I jump rope. I do 300 jump ropes per set." Talk about how he's always training for longevity. And I just thought it was funny. And I didn't realize he had that many siblings. Again, he was, very introverted, which I know we're going to talk about. But he grew up in Roosevelt, Long Island. And, it was 1 square mile, and Dr. J, Julius Irving grew up in Roosevelt, Eddie Murphy, Chuck D, the famous rapper who was the lead frontman for Public Enemy, one of the OG rap groups in the world. He had so many good things, but this talk about the introversion, like this guy was very quiet, very quiet. I joked, I said, "Russ, you never laughed at any of my jokes." And he basically said, "Well, I had to learn to laugh." He was very serious. I think he had, 10 siblings, talked about, 3rd grade. He needed sneakers because they didn't have enough money. And his mom said, "You need to ask your dad for the sneakers." So, it was that type of, and he talked about, he goes, "I never want to be in a position when I grow up to ask anyone for money." So
that was a big deal. That was a big deal to him.
Yeah, he's probably one of 12, 13, 14 guests on the Corporate Couch that have served, in the military, retired as a colonel in the Air Force. I still remember in his every Monday was like ROTC day in college, and they'd be in their uniform and all that stuff. But and I love his take, and I know you're an introvert and I'm an extrovert, but on, talking about leadership as an introvert, which is, a fantastic topic. Again, because I don't know what the stats are, but, it's probably maybe 50-50 extroverts, introverts. But, everybody thinks of leadership sometimes as the extrovert, the charismatic person or whatever it is. But, he talked about introversion isn't shyness, it's energy management, which I love that take. Introverts speak less because they prepare more. And when they do say something, people listen type thing. And then even his recent college graduate, advice for recent college graduate, he said, do your homework, be prepared. And then when he retired as a colonel, he got a franchise in leather and vinyl repair. I mean, he learned a lot there, meaning like, yeah, this is not for me.
But that's how you learn that stuff, right?
Yeah. And and even Russ and I at Manhattan, we were, in the business school, the same major. We were information systems majors. So it was just fun to reminisce. And I had not seen him. And my good friend Charlie Banks from Manhattan, met him the first day too, who was on the 5th floor with Russ. I was on the 4th floor of De La Salle dorm. He reached out to me and said, hey, you need to get Russ on your podcast. So it was just a great Manhattan College moment for me at least. And Joe, what was your take on Russ's episode?
This was an amazing interview, and I literally took more notes on this interview than I think I have on just about any other interview on the Corporate Couch. I just filled the page with turning the paper sideways to write in the margins and things like that. It was a very, very interesting interview. I love the story about asking his dad to buy sneakers because that has a very personal connection to me, that I went through a very similar story to that. I love the fact that he was an introvert. We're going to get back to that in a second. But he also had this very wise take on pricing issues that entrepreneurs have. And I think a lot of the audience of the Corporate Couch, being very entrepreneuristic, has suffered with this about how do you price your service or your product. And, there isn't any really good answer, but he landed on this answer of working with companies where the project is being funded by a grant, so that he knew that if the grant was paid, then he would get paid because his services were included inside the terms of the grant. That's a very unique way of tackling this problem, and I would encourage all of our entrepreneurs in the audience that have problems with pricing. Maybe you can't come up with that solution, but come up with some unique solution for your pricing. That's just sort of an inspiration for that. One of the things that he did talk about this, and you mentioned it, was about introverts. And by the way, we're living proof that introverts and extroverts can be friends with each other. So there's that. But one of the experiences that I had as an introvert when I was in my consulting career is that we had an issue at a client that I thought deserved some attention. And so I went back to my boss at the branch office for the consulting company I was working for and mentioned this to him. And the situation was immediately resolved, just immediately. And I came back to him and I said, how did that get resolved so quickly? I was expecting to jump through all sorts of hoops and everything. And he said this, he said, you are such an introvert and you don't speak out about anything. So when you do speak out about something and bring it to our attention, we pay attention to it. It's this E.F. Hutton kind of thing, And that's a characteristic of introversion, is that we wear very proudly, is that we may not speak out very much, but by golly, when we do speak out, people listen to us. And I think that's an interesting take on introversion. I love the interview. It was just a remarkable interview. And he's a remarkable guy. I'm glad we had a chance to meet.
And what a great coach he would make for a business owner too. I mean, just based on his background, and I just think it would be an honor to work with him. So love that he's doing great things, and he's as fit as anyone that has ever appeared on the Corporate Couch. So he's got that going for him. Joe, what are you thinking about today in lovely Oak Grove, Missouri?
Oak Grove, that's where I live, just outside of east of Kansas City. Oak Grove's an interesting town because, we've got a little police department like a lot of small suburbs do. We had a problem in that police department, though, because the guy was stealing the wheels from all the police cars in town.
Really?
Yeah, but that's okay. They're on it. The police are working tirelessly to find him.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of The Corporate Couch. If you enjoy the podcast, I would love for you to take 2 minutes out of your day to rate us 5 stars and write a review. Please join me next week to learn from another great leader sharing their professional journey and insights.